here to our second episode, What Constitutes a Rich Life? Today, I'm Zac Adraneia. I'll be opening up the topic. It's a very interesting topic today because we always hear the word rich. And when we think about the word rich, it's something, I would say everybody wants to be rich if they had the chance.
I think everybody wants to be rich in some way, shape or form. So what does it mean?
Well, that's what we're about to get to.
I'm excited and I can't wait to open up this topic.
Okay, so one thing that I would just like to go into a story before I get into definitions. So one thing that was interesting was when I started traveling, I really did not conceptualize what rich meant because I guess, we live in Australia, and Australia is a country whereby we are a lot more privileged than other countries in the world. One, we're isolated. Two, we don't share international borders with other countries. And I mean, that's part of that, being isolated, but the borders is a big thing. You can be isolated with borders in like the mountains, but we're properly isolated by not sharing borders. But then the third thing is that we are a relatively new country with a hustling and bustling economy, at least for the last 200 years or so. And we have a low population, high resource, and we've had quite a rich life for most of it. Would you say that's correct? That's correct?
Definitely. All those facts seem really on point for me.
Now, why I'm bringing this up is because, I would say a majority of our audience watching this will be from Australia, is that I did not know how rich we were comparatively when I went to go to Europe, when I lived in India, and, even just, I guess, traveling in general, the money I had to spend. Now, I'm using this as an analogy because what happened was I didn't have a concept of rich prior to that. I just thought rich was kind of like an abstract concept that was only for people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all that.
Exactly the same.
But as soon as I started realizing being rich was relative, and there was a spectrum, and there was a relative as to how you perceive richness, my whole reality changed. So I guess a lot of people out there have heard of Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I actually haven't read the book. I think I might have read parts of it, but I haven't read it in full. I've watched his videos. But the way he explains it, the way I relate to it as well, is that it's not that you don't reply with things such as I can't afford it, that's too much for me, it never happened or whatnot. I always, ever since I was young, I always had this mentality, that's not impossible. How do you get there? What's the process, right? Because it's the process to everything. Unless you're lucky enough to win the lotto, then you're going to have to go through a few hurdles of the process in order to get rich. So that's when I started realizing it started with the mindset, the mentality. It all started up here, and how you perceive rich wherever you were. There are people living in India when I traveled that felt that they were rich relative to their life circumstances. And when I saw that, I was just like, wow, rich really is a mindset. And it's a way in which you can fruitfully improve your life in all areas, not just with money, which, I've initially used as a point of reference, but also relationships, health, and experiences. So I'd like to throw it over to you, Sim. What does it mean to be rich for you?
That's a very deep and interesting question. And first, I want to touch on what you just said, because you made some really good points. And you, of all people, have a very extensive repertoire of experience when it comes to traveling through countries that have very different human experiences and very different levels of conceptualization of what rich means to them. So their reality of rich is completely different to our reality of rich, or to someone in a Western third world country or whatnot. It's very different, and you have a very good grasp on that because you spent an extended period overseas in these countries and lived the life that they live and spoken to the people on the ground. And I can say that I've also done some of it, maybe not as extensively as you, but
where would you have said you've spent the most time kind of grasping this concept?
Probably a lot in Eastern Europe, in places like some places on the outskirts of Hong Kong,
Turkey, when you were in Turkey?
When I was in Turkey, I spent a lot of time in Turkey.
Because Turkey, there are a few interesting stories from the Book of Archetypes.
Yeah, there's some very interesting stories.
I wanted to actually just, while we're on this topic, you mentioned one story the other day when we were reminiscing. And by the way, for those of you who don't know this, that maybe you've watched the previous video, Sim and I travelled together overland from Lebanon to Poland. We went through many different places through Eastern Europe, but we spent a bit of time in Turkey. We almost had a bomb explode. Well, the bomb exploded, but not near us, thankfully. Not too near to us.
We definitely felt the shockwaves of it.
We felt the shockwave, yeah. But in Turkey, we had a very interesting experience dealing with people on the street. I want to throw it over to Sim to talk about this, which will be written in my book, System 333, Archetypes and Intuition.
So, yeah, we had some very deep experiences together in some very poor places in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East.
The guy with the tissues.
Yeah, so we were on a train in Turkey, and it was such a sad thing to witness because you were sitting in the middle of Istanbul, about to catch your train, and you see a refugee from Syria dressed in a full suit. He was a middle-aged man, probably about 50, 45. He looked like any CEO or businessman, but you could tell he was scruffy and well-worn and kind of broken in the face. You could see it with the soot on his face, and he was walking around in his posture was also denoting someone of lower status and someone that didn't feel like overly self-esteemed about himself. And he was with his daughter, who was dressed, I remember, in this pink dress, and she was maybe like 3 or 4 years old. And they were walking around the train, and this broke my heart to see. They were walking around the train with a tissue box, begging people sitting in the train to buy one tissue.
For like 1 lira.
For 1 lira, which is equivalent to nothing in Australian dollars. And just by looking at him, for first glance, you would look like this guy looks like any other dude that runs a company in the middle of Sydney or Melbourne. You could see it, but you could see the wornness and the tiredness and the sadness in his eyes, and that he'd been broken to this point where he had to sell tissues just to look after his children. And it was such a real kind of thing, seeing that in a city that wasn't. You could say Turkey is a very, very skewed in terms of the gap between rich and poor. And you've got your very poor people, and you've got your really rich and filthy rich people, and you got some middle class, but there's a big polarity between the two. But just to see that in terms of the human experience, in terms of the same archetype could be somewhere dressed in a scruffy suit trying to sell you a tissue, or the same archetype could be somewhere in the 50th story top tower, about to close a business meeting. So it was a big eye-opening experience to what the word richness kind of means. But I want to pull it back to something else. So that was a story in Turkey, but I want to pull it back to what richness does mean to me. And it's not necessarily financial richness at all. I think in the process of making money and understanding what financial stability does mean, when I see richness, I think of a few things. I think of my health. Without my health, I have nothing. And this is something which is very attached personally to my journey throughout my 20s, especially in the last 3-4 years, where I've had to suffer a lot of chronic illnesses or issues that have taken away my health from 100% optimal ability or health. And understanding that the foundation of health is almost everything, because it takes away your richness of the human experience. So once again, we use the word rich in two different essences here. And so health being number one, because you can't live the human experience in any way, shape or form if your health has been robbed from you, or it is maybe the universe trying to direct you on a path to more richness in life by tapping you on the shoulder, being, hey, Sim, not over there. You need to walk in this direction. So it will hit you with a bout of pain or suffering or something to change the direction of your life. Another one is very close social interactions and having very close, intimate relationships with friends, family, with the people that are your acquaintances in life, that you can be vulnerable and share the deepest parts of yourself and truth with them, and vice versa, and you can open up that connection between one another. I think that's such a profound thing that creates a feeling of richness in someone else's life. and especially in my life. And I see a lot of people lacking that, and they externally keep looking for this point of substance that they can encapsulate as richness, whether it be money, cars, houses, pleasure experiences. But the fundamentals are really where I think you're going to get that level and essence of richness from. And I'll go into the other ones, but I want to open up just to see what your perspective of richness is, Zac. Like, what do you see as what constitutes richness for you when you think about the word rich?
So I mentioned mindset, but I want to actually just touch off what you said, because what your priorities are in terms of, what you value really will constitute what you're going to be rich in. One thing you mentioned, which I find very interesting, is friendships and relationships with people, right? Why I think this is important to be rich in, I recently just finished up at a job I was in for 3 years, and when I started evaluating and thinking about the good that came out of the job, even though the money was really good, so there's that richness of money, it wasn't that was the most important thing. The most important thing was all the friendships and times I spent with people that I valued, that I enjoyed, and that I miss now that I've been out of the job for some time. Because one thing is that those type of relationships and friendships that you build with people, regardless of where you meet them, that is what gives you a more fruitful and more enjoyable human experience, because the human experience is shared as a collective, not just as an individual, not just for your own selfish gain, to have a big bank account and to buy things for yourself, right?
Because you ain't taking that money anywhere with you.
Exactly. So how do you enrich your human experience? Well, you don't just do it on your own. You have to build good relationships, have enriching relationships. And the first person you need to build a good relationship with is yourself. Once I learnt to love myself, which I will arguably say that really kind of cemented itself when I was isolated alone in the Trans-Siberian. Once you learn to love yourself, then really start learning to love others and develop that richness of relationships as a collective to enjoy your life.
And I want to put a caveat in here, because a lot of people throw around the word love yourself, right?
Yep.
And I think the key of that topic, which is a whole topic in itself, right, is once you start the process of learning to love yourself, because it's a never-ending process. There's always dark parts and parts that you missed and parts that are in the shadow that...
Integrate the shadow.
You have to integrate the shadow. So there's many parts of you that you're going to keep experiencing that are new and have been hidden from you all the way up to your deathbed. You're going to continually keep experiencing these parts of yourself that you need to, one, confront. And obviously, as Jordan Peterson says, confront willingly, which I think is a very important motif in the story of mythology and the story of humankind. So you need to confront them willingly, and you need to integrate them and make peace with them, and don't make decisions from fear. So if you're coming from a place of fear rather than a place of love, I think that is also a big one when I think about richness. Is my life based on decisions made from true love, like love for myself, love for other people, love for what I do? Or is it coming from a place of fear? Is it coming from a place of closeness? Is it coming from a place of me wanting a certain outcome because I'm scared of the vulnerability or me exposing myself for who I truly am? And this can be a very confronting thing to think about, and it can bring up uncomfortable emotions, because it puts a reflection directly upon yourself. Who have I been up to this point? Have I been someone that has been making decisions based on fear? And a lot of people will justify that, oh, no, I would never make a decision based on fear. But I can tell you that I make a lot of decisions still based on fear. And I'm getting good at reconciling with them and realizing that I'm making them out of fear, right? And they're very deep. It's not only the relationships you have with your family, your parents, your siblings. It's relationships you have with intimate partners, with friends, with the work you decide to do, your level of mission and service you decide to pursue? Is that coming from a place of fear or a place of love? Like, it's all these things you decide to do. Your intimate partner. Are you with that person from a place of fear or a place of true love and acceptance for yourself, who you are, your personality, their personality, and your level of service and mission to this world and universe? Where's it coming from? Connecting with that deeply is such a profound thing. So what do you think about what I just said in relation to that?
Yeah, because see, when you live in fear, you can't love fear. I mean, I don't know if would you say there are people out there that love fear? I mean, I don't know anyone that loves fear.
Okay, so
do you know anyone?
So I actually went through this experience, right? And it was in a shamanic psychedelic ceremony where I confronted the essence of fear itself, and it showed itself to me in
what form?
In a form. It was a form of like, think of like the scariest looking devil-like satanic shadow being. It came out and looked at me, and I had to confront it, and to confront it directly, just as you are real looking at me and talking with me. It was there just as we are sitting in this room, and I had to confront it. And when I was in the process of confronting this thing, there was every part of me wanted to run and turn and run away, right? But whatever my internal truth and the real me behind the ego of me stood there and said, no, Sim, this is where you stop and you stand. It doesn't matter whether you die and it kills you. It's okay, because
you have to take
that's
it.
your physical body.
You have to
and
take
you
it.
will always be here. You are never gonna materialize into nothingness. Your consciousness, your soul will continue. So I stood there and I felt this like beautiful presence and this guiding kind of connection with myself and my deeper self. And I felt safe, but also fearful at the same time. So I didn't turn and run. I stood there and said, I surrender. Come at me, whatever you got, man. I looked at it dead in the eye. Like I felt like every part of my spine was going to shudder. That's how intense the presence and force of it was. And I stood there, and in that moment, I realized what it was. I was like, no matter how dark and disgusting and fearful I am of you, and how despicable you are. I was looking at the form. This was all a narrative that was going on as I was communicating with it. I said, no matter how dark, disgusting.
Sounds like you saw your shadow.
Yeah, I literally saw the other part of the human experience.
I've seen it in dreams. You seen it in a trip?
Yeah.
I've seen it in dreams.
And I looked at it and I said, no matter how dark and disgusting you are, what makes us different is that I can look at you and I can forgive you and learn to love you. And that's when it just materialized.
Yeah,
into
integration.
nothingness.
That's integration.
And that's pure integration of your shadow, right?
So back to the holistic topic of being rich. We've kind of gone into this whole shadow integration somehow in this, which is part of being rich, because it's part of integrating all those parts of yourself in order to be more whole. Having a rich life is having a wholesome life.
Exactly. It comes back down to that topic of encapsulating all the individual parts to making a whole, right? And they're all the dark parts and all the good parts and all the sorry parts, sad parts, guilty parts.
That's
all
exactly
parts.
right. Cook it in a soup, boil it up. We'll see you on the next video.